Okay, where were we? So we've got it so that we can create stuff now. I guess we just need to fill out all of the other functionality in here. Now you could go a little bit further and basically extract all of these into their own methods. Actually, maybe we will do that. Hmm. Am I going to go the extra mile and do that? You know what? I think I might be. Uh, No, maybe another time. So basically what I'm thinking is you would probably take this create function and turn it into its own composable. So you can go abstract it even further out, but I'm not sure it's really justified in this situation, especially considering the size of this project. So I'm not going to do that. Yeah, I think that'll be fine. Okay, so the data, I'm starting to wonder now, should we actually have a ref with the data, or should this just be concerned with the API request? No, I think I'll use a ref with the data. This is what I've seen other libraries do as well. All right, so let's just move on to the next thing, which would be find. So there must be an easy way to do a find. I bet you there is. We'll copy that, paste this down, and let's create a find function for Supabase. And so we've got fetching data. You can probably say where ID. So we comment foreign tables, filtering, querying with count option. Yeah, okay, so we'll probably do a select here, or like a where clause. Oh, here we go. So you got this .eq. That's what we do to select a specific user or a specific node. So let's come in here and say, well, did we have others as well? Yeah, index as well, which is to find all of them. But for find, so we check for a user ID. Yeah, we're always going to do that. We set the loading value from, and instead of insert, we say dot select, and they're saying here all from users. I think it says all by default, so I might be able to just say dot select and then add in here equals, and then we get the entity name dot ID to get that specific record. Is there, I mean, surely there's a easy way to get this. I'm going to quickly check Supabase get by ID. Yeah, yeah. It looks like it just works a bit differently with Supabase because you are closer to the database layer. So we'll say equal user.id to, but it won't be users, it will be entities. So we want to come in here and say entity.id. Do I have to say entity there? Yeah, I would, just in case there's like more on the query. And we want to see if that's equal to the ID that is sent through here. So that wouldn't be a form, that would be an ID that's sent through. So what about form then? How do you know if a user has permission to do the thing? I don't know if we need to do this whole send in the user ID thing, if it'll still work when we're finding data. I don't know, let's take a look. So then we just send the ID through there. And I think that's everything. Now this is always going to be the same. So maybe we'll call this like handle response or handle error. I don't know. We'll think about that a bit later on. All right, so data.value is equal to the response data. Yeah, I think that's all good. Now we need to expose find so that we can actually use it. And I think that's it. So I might just create another button here, I guess. Button at click is equal to find. And I'm just going to use the console to take a look at that So label is equal to find. And then I guess we'll come in here and we'll say, we'll pull find out of there as well. Now, one problem we're going to get is that this loading state is now linked. So when I'm finding something, the create is also going to show the loading state. So that's kind of problematic. We also need to know what we're finding. So let's have an example here by just grabbing something from our database. We'll do a quick refresh. And I'm guessing this one's me here. So let's do a copy on that. What does that do? I just need a quick way to copy this. Copy. That work? Yeah. So should be able to find that specific note. Let's come in, give it a check. I don't know, has that worked? I guess we can check that by saying, spitting out the data here. Let's do this properly. Let's add in a pre-tag and we'll just spit out the data, which is going to be the result. And we'll also have a pre-tag for our error. I can come down here and just say, for example, well, that's spelled wrong. We can say here H3 for the error, should be a good size, and then a H3 for the data as well. So we can easily distinguish between those two. And let's lay this out a little bit nicer. So we'll change this from a flex to a column, which is just going to send everything in the right direction. Yeah, that'll do, just to make this a bit easier to work with. So now we'll do a find, and there we go. Now the problem is we're getting both there. Does it have an ID and a UID, I wonder? Oh, I'm using the wrong thing here. I'm using the user underscore ID. We want to send through the ID. So for example, 6. So let's come down here and send through a 6, which is good. This makes a lot more sense to me. Save it. And let's see how that works now. All right, so that's not working. Find, let's see if I'm using that correctly. Find, you give it the ID. And you probably need that equal part to be first in the query. Let me see, EQ. No, it's doing a select and then it's doing this EQ thing. Entity.id is equal to the ID that was passed through here. I think I've done that code correct. Whose value on the stated column exactly matches the specified value. Weird. Alright, so that's blatantly not working. Maybe I need to do some sort of like a toString here. No, it doesn't change it either. So this looks the same as saying from the place that it's from, select, oh, this is a better example here. And then you do an equal to check. Let's just change that to notes. No, it shouldn't be notes. It should be, yeah, notes, plural, like that. Because this is the entity name. Oh man, don't know what's going on there. And that is the correct, that's my note data, right? Yeah, but it's finding all of them. Was I looking at the wrong thing? No, that's filtering within a join. So querying, no, that's querying JSON data. Is there anything else I can pass through to? Okay, this is just saying exactly what to select. Is there like a dot find, I wonder? Dot, No. What do we have here? So it seems to be after dot select we get the equal. So let's see here, dot equal to. Wow, this is an amazing API. How cool is this? Yeah, weird. Entity.id, is it an ID? So if we go to our notes table, yeah, that's it there, ID. So where the ID is equal to whatever ID I pass through there. For some reason, that's just blatantly not getting noticed. Let's check the exact syntax in case they're doing something different there. Dot equal. Let's go back to that. Maybe you don't have to add the extra entity part. I can just say ID. Okay. Yeah, okay. So it's probably when you add entity, it's assuming it's a relation then. So we already know it's that entity, and we want to say where the ID of that entity is equal to the ID passed through. All right, that makes sense. But in this case, we want to say data.value. We want to say if response.data. So if we've got it, and response.data response.data.length. So we want to check that we've actually got some data in there, just in case it returns nothing. And we're just going to return the very first thing on response.data, because when you do a find, you expect to just get the object back. So that's working now. And then you could also say, I guess you could do like another level of error handling here. Oh, by the way, this should return, shouldn't it? If we've got an error, set it and then return. Do that up here as well. This definitely needs to be cleaned up in some way. So we'll also, so we can say here, let's basically take that out and say if we do not have a length on that, then we'll say error.value is equal to, what does the error look like again? I can't remember. I might just keep it as a, I think it's like an object with a message. That's all right, I can fix that up later if it's wrong. And we'll set that equal to something like not found. Let's go with that. We'll make it a bit more verbose. What about entity with ID and then the ID not found. All right, that'll do for now, just so I've got some good error reporting if things go wrong there. So I would imagine, let's just check if that actually works. If I put in something like a number that doesn't exist there, we should get that error coming back. There we go. Notes with ID, such and such not found. Cool. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. That's working really well. We've got find. Let's go ahead and add the rest of the functionality. This should get easier every time we add one, since the APIs do look so similar. We'll do, what was next? An update. So update's probably more similar to a create. So let's grab this functionality here. We'll come down here and we'll paste it in. And then we will say update. So you send through the, was it the ID first or the form first? What do you think? Probably the ID first. This is what I'm updating. This is the data to update it. I think that's how I would say it out loud. Once again, we do all that user ID checking stuff to see if we need to send that through. Hang on, and we got rid of it here, didn't we? Yeah, good. So we've got a loading state. Instead of an insert, there should be a way to update data. And I bet you the docs are really nice with this. Here we go, modifying / updating data. So you say what it's from, update, and then you put in the thing that matches it. That should be easy. So from that update, you send in the new data And there it is there in the form. And then you do a match to basically say, and I bet you this match could just be the exact same as what we did for the find. Yeah, so let's do this. ID is equal to whatever ID I sent through there. In fact, we can just say ID like that. That should work. Dealing with errors. If we get an error, yeah, if we have response.data, yeah, am I going to get all of the data back though? That's what I want to know. Because if I don't get it all back, then this isn't actually going to work. We would have to do, no, you know what? If I only get part of the data back, then I probably would want to set data to that because use API wants to be very specific to what it's getting back. So I'm not going to do any merging there. That's kind of what the avenue my brain was going down. So now we need to actually use update. Let's expose that here, save it. We'll come back in here and we'll add an update button. And we've almost reached a point where it's actually going to be easier to build out the UI. So let's update the one with an ID of 6, was it? Where are you? Yeah, there's one with an ID of 6. So can I hide that? No, that didn't work. Will that hide it? No. Bugger. I'll just go full screen when I want to check it. So now we should be able to update this. Let's pull out the update functionality. Once this starts getting long, I just give it its own lines, like so. There we go. And now we can yank update out of there. Let's do that here. And by the way, I'm going to change loading to a specific word like updating or creating, etc. And loading is just going to be an all-encompassing one. But you can be more specific if you like. I think that's probably a good idea. So let's say if you click this, update the one with a 6 there, and we need to give it a form as well. And we'll do that by, you know what, let's just reuse this form. Yeah, by putting the form through like that. Okay, so I have been updated, mate. Update. Yeah, good. It looks like you do get all of the data back. And if we go to Supabase, that's the one we updated, the one with an ID of 6. And if I refresh this, it should now be different. Okay, that was really straightforward. Let's have a look at the next one. We're reaching the end. We now need a delete. Delete's probably similar to find. So let's grab the find functionality. We'll come down here, change that to delete. We take in the ID. And then we say, I might come in here and just look at the delete section. From, that's correct, delete. And once again, use the match in order to find that. So we'll come in here and we'll say match. And then we can just send through an object where the ID is equal to the ID that we passed through there. Now we can't call that delete because it's already used, that word. So I'll change it to remove, but this is what I do. I then say delete is equal to remove like that. So I still get that nice API of using the word delete because I think that is much nicer using the word delete. All right, so from entities delete, we use the match in order to find the data. We stop loading. We handle errors. We don't need this more advanced error handling. We're using this standard one. And that's it. So when we delete one, let's delete the one with an ID of 5 and see if that works. Hang on, is there a user? Oh, I can't delete that. It's not mine. So I have to delete the one with an ID of 4. So let's come back here and we'll create a new button here, which we will call delete. There we go. And, oh, can I do that? Bugger, I can't because now delete is in the global scope. What does it say here for the errors? Let's go back. Yeah, unexpected keyword delete. So let's change that to remove. We actually are going to have to use the word remove there. Bugger. Remove. So come back there. That's remove. Save it. And here, instead of the delete word, we use remove instead. All right, let's move that to the bottom. Do this stuff in order. And now I should be able to remove one with an ID of, what ID did I decide on? Number with an ID of 4. So 4, save it, and let's see if this works. Delete. And you get that thing back, which is really nice that it does that. And if we do a refresh here, we should lose this one with an ID of 4. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And there we go, it's gone. Perfect. All right, so all that functionality is done. Create, find, update, delete. The last one we want is index, which is kind of an important one, and I'd probably do that first as well. It's going to be really easy to do as well. I think you just say select. So let's copy this create one, and we'll change that to index. Same thing with that whole user ID ordeal. Actually, do I need to do that? I might not need to in this case. So then we say from there, select, and we're not doing any filtering. I just want you to grab everything that you can. Now, would we filter it by? Now, if you want to filter it by user ID, you do that specifically yourself. Okay. If there's any errors, show them, and then set the response data. Yeah, I think that's all correct. And we don't need a form in there. We're just indexing everything. Cool, save that. We'll come back here, and then we want a button here that is going to index the data. Index, index, and then we need to yank that out here so that we can actually use it. Save it. Oh, let's go full screen. All right, we've only got one for now, but let's come back here and add another row just to test that this does work. We're going to need that user ID. And so we'll come in here, copy that, insert row, there's a user ID, and we'll call this final insert. Just need something to remember it by. And now once that's done, we'll come down here and do another find. There's another index there, and we get both of them. So they're all working. There we go. That entire API has been built out. Couple of things I want to tweak now to make it a little bit nicer. First of all, we've got loading, but I also want to have const creating. Should we just have loading state? No, I'd rather have them individually like this. False, create, what do you call them? Index, create, find, update, remove. So indexing, creating, finding, updating, removing. And there we go. This stuff's going to be pretty straightforward because we just take the loading section like this and we change it to the thing that it's doing. So indexing. So we'll do loading and indexing. And look, there are ways that you could do this a little bit cleaner, but I'll do that later in the interest of saving time. And we'll call this creating, finding, and updating, deleting, and then removing. There you go. Oops. Oh, this would have been a fast way to do it. Cool. So we have all of those loading states as well. They need to be exposed. So let's come down, grab all of those, make sure that they are exposed. And they're all going to need some commas. I think that's it. So now we can do all of these actions. We've got some feedback on whether or not they're loading. The next thing we do now is add another layer of abstraction to make it a little bit easier still. Should we do a UI? No, we're not going to do the UI yet. I do want to add these other layers of abstraction first because that's kind of my first, my primary focus here. So then we'll jump into the scratch pad. The next one is use model API. Now its job is to not just fetch the data, it's going to use API to fetch the data and insert it into the store. So that's why I separate these two out, just in case you want to fetch data and not put it into the store. This is why it's really important to break your code apart so that you do maintain that flexibility, and it makes your API super useful. So let's come in here. We're going to call this use model API. I'm going to copy all of that. We're not using search for now. Oh, we'll leave that question mark there actually. Let's leave it like that. And every time it says delete, let's change it to remove. Okay, so use model API. Where is that? Composables, new file, use model API.js. So export default, this is going to be a function. And now what this will take in is the model itself. So not the, well, model, the class itself. So what will we call this? Class, or model class maybe, class name. No, because you want it to be the actual class. So let's just call it, I can't use the word classes because it's reserved. It's always hard with stuff like this. Yeah, model class. Let's go with that. Model class. And I think that's it. Now we can start building out this functionality. Now the first thing I'm going to do here is say const use, what do we call this? We'll call this API service is equal to use model, or use API, I think we called it, use API. And now what we're going to do is model class is going to have entity on it, because if you go back to previous videos, I created this note.js. We're using Vuex-ORM under the hood, and it always has an entity. It has to have an entity. So what we can do is we can say here, use API, and as we wrote before, it needs to have an entity. And then we come in here and set that entity to model class dot entity. All right, so now we've got an API service for the model that was sent through. But now that we've got the model, we can do other stuff like inserting, updating, deleting, etc. All right, so let's grab all of these. Like so. I can delete that now. Paste them in like that. And I can say now async function the thing. And there we go. We can start writing out our functions. And then we'll do a return here, and I might just paste them in again so they're all ready to go. All right, so for create, we simply say API service, and we can do this await API service dot create, and we're basically going to proxy a form in here. Right, because remember, create takes in a form and gives us back a promise. And all the error handling and the data receiving is done for us within API service. So this is really cool because it means that now we can say, now we can actually perform the insert when this is done by saying form dot, no, not form, sorry, model class dot insert, and then pass through the data that we get back from that. API service dot data dot value. So this is a Vuex-ORM thing, that insert command. And usually you'd use TypeScript by this point to get better typing here, but I wanted to make this a little bit more consumable for other people. So that's the data that we're going to pass in there. And that's it. So notice that this is concerned mostly just with inserting the data into the store, dealing with that dance between the model and the API. That's what this is in charge of, whereas that other class that we had, or that other composable, is really just concerned with getting the data from the API. All right, so let's come back here. We got create. Let's do a find next. And instead of create, let's say here find. And then we can say here model dot. No, I don't actually need to do anything there. Yeah, model dot insert, and then I'll take the result of that and put it in. So that's literally the exact same. Data, I'm pretty sure, can accept an array or an object. So that code is actually ends up being the exact same, which is kind of cool. So let's do another one now. We've also got update. So update. And once again, this is the same. We're just doing an insert of that data into the store. You can do an update here, but insert is usually a lot faster. Since we're getting all the data back anyway, I can just do an insert which finds the data by the ID and then automatically inserts it. So that's really, really nice. Remove, and I believe this is remove. What is it in VueXORM? I actually can't remember. Deleting data. What do they do? So user.delete, and then you can pass through the ID. It's that simple. So delete, and then we can say here, get me that data back, data.value dot ID. And just to be safe, we're going to do a little bit of optional chaining here. We probably only need the optional chaining there, actually. No, we might need it in both those places. This isn't an update. This is a remove. There we go. So a form needs to be passed through there. Now with find, we need to give it an ID. Didn't finish those ones off. I noticed that the code's a little bit more succinct here, which is nice. All that error handling is already done for us. And you could put more error handling on top of VueXORM, but honestly, I'm not sure that it would be worth it at this point. So there we go. That's easy. We simply do the remove and then delete the data in the store. There's an index one. This is going to be really similar to a find. So we say, hey, API service, do an index. So get all the data for us. And then once again, just insert the result of that. And then, of course, we had search, which we are not implementing yet. I'm not sure exactly what that would look like, but you could, obviously do some filtering on top. Cool. All right, so I think that's it. Use Model API is pretty much that simple, except we need to do a little bit of extra work, a little bit of extra exposing here. So let's copy all of that, paste those in there. All right, so we've got all that functionality. But we also want some functionality out of the API service as well. And let's figure out exactly what we want, actually. Use API. And I like to restate all of these so it's really clear what the APIs look like, as opposed to using the spread operator. And so we've got error, data. I don't think we need data, and I try not to give access to things that we shouldn't need. User ID, we'll expose that. We might actually need that later on. And of course, all of this loading state related stuff we want to expose as well. So there we go. We now come down here and we can expose all of that like so. And then that's equal to API service dot, and then whatever the name of that method is. So there we go. Use model is basically the exact same as API service, except it's inserting data into the store as well. Now, I don't know if I've totally screwed that up. We're going to have to actually give it a try. So instead of use API, we'll say now use model API. And instead of sending through notes as a string like that, we're going to send through... No, okay, hang on. So this user value ID... Yeah, we can actually get that behind the scenes now. Hang on, let's get that imported and inserted. We don't need that anymore. So check this out. This part where we're getting the user, we can also delete that as well. So use auth state. I'll cut that out. Oh, you know what? Let's do this properly. I'm going to split that into use model API, the one that we're working on now. It's going to be the one that has use auth state, and it's going to be the one that has the user available to it, right? Like so. And then when we call use API, we can actually give it the ID by saying user.value.id. And there we go. Now this can basically be abstracted into this use model API composable, which is really nice. And look at that gorgeous, gorgeous API we end up with in the end. How cool is that? So now, if everything works, I don't think there's anything else I need to do. Let's open up our console and just see what happens. So another note for you. Let's go create and jump into the network here. Not the network, let's go to the view store. Vuex, and here's our notes here. So we've got that note that we just created, another note for you, so that worked. Now, if I do an index here, look at that. All of that data was fetched from the back end, check we got no errors, and inserted into the store for us. How cool is that? So that's the extra step we've got now. We want to do an update with the one that has an ID of 6. And let's change that update code. I think I got it to just use the form, didn't I? Yeah, it's just using the form that was passed through. So now let's change it to just bleep. And the one with an ID of 6, if we do an update there, oops, something went wrong. Here we go. Cannot set properties of undefined setting user ID. Use API. When I do update, did I send through the ID in the form? Yeah. So where's this coming from? Undefined setting user ID. So it didn't find the form there. It would appear. So in our update, there's our form. And we've definitely got it. All right, let's just refresh the page. Maybe something got lost there. Update. All right, so let's put a debugger in there and call update again. The form is equal to undefined. So it seems that for some reason that form is not being sent through okay. How strange. Must admit that's a bit of a mystery to me. Let's go to use model API. We'll find our update code, which is right here. Okay, it's missing the ID. That needs to receive an ID as well. There we go. All right, so I reckon that'll work now. So I can get rid of the debugger and let's do an update. There we go. So let's check the store. And the one with an ID of 6 was changed to nothing. Let's change it again. Update. And there we go. That works. Wow, Supabase is lightning fast. This is pretty awesome. All right, so update has been tested. Then we've got remove and index. I don't think I've tested those yet. So let's just have a look here. Index, so we get all the data, 6, 7, and 8. Let's remove the one with an ID of 8. Where's the remove one? 8, save it, and delete. Okay, so we've got a problem there. So in remove, we send through the ID of 8, and it is not being sent through. So let's say ID, and make sure that gets sent through there. I just didn't proxy that, that's why it didn't work. And let's have a look again. Notes, we'll index them all, 6, 7, and 8, delete. Let's do a refresh and another index to see if it deleted on the back end. It deleted on the back end, but it did not delete on the front end. So let's come back here to use model API. We say API service dot remove. So at this point, all we really need to do is data value. Well, we might as well just use that ID that we've got already and just send it back through there like that. Let's try that again. Oh, I need to test it again now. Let's go back to deleting and check that I've actually done this right. Delete, and then you just send through the ID. Yeah, it is that simple. And here it's delete and sending the ID. Yep. So let's create some data again, and we can do that easily with the UI. Another bit of data, create. And now, no, I have to go full screen. Now within the store, we should have that data, and it's got an ID of 9. So now let's do the delete with the data that has an ID of 9. It's reaching a point now where this would be easy to work with if we had a full UI, isn't it? All right, so now let's just do another index to check. So we got 679, delete. And there we go, it gets deleted from the back end and it gets deleted from the store. Cool, let's move on to the next one. Well, next one is index, so that's everything. How cool is that? We now have this gorgeous, gorgeous API that allows us to easily manipulate data within our store. So this is going to create it on the back end, and it's going to make sure that it's entered into our store on the front end, and that goes for all of these. They all do the sensible action to make sure that our front end and back end data is all in sync using Supabase. How cool is that? I think it's awesome. Now, the next thing I want to do is that last level of abstraction, which is use model. So we'll create a new file here called useModel.js, and we'll say here export default. And I think I prefer to give it a function name. So export default function use model. It's probably a nicer way to do it. And is use model API doing that as well? Yeah, export default function use model API. I'm pretty sure this makes debugging a little bit easier as well from memory. Putting in a function name there. Okay, so now use model uses use model API. And so we'll say here const model API is equal to use model API. We're going to pass through it the model, and what do we call it again? Model class. Model class. So let's copy that, let's paste it in there, and now model API is ready to start using. And now let's have a look at our scratch pad, which gave us what our API is going to look like. And it looks a little something like this. So create, fetch, update, remove, all that jazz. But then we've got some extra like little bits and pieces we can do to make it much easier to deal with a model. All right, so now I'll paste those down there like that. And I want to say here const ID is equal to a reference. Don't know why I always have to import this. It never auto imports from view. There we go. A reference of nothing to begin with. All right, so the idea is the way you use model, if you want to find a model, you set the ID and then you can call find. And this is really cool because you can do stuff like this. You can have, for example, you could say const note is equal to use model, and then send through the note like that. And then you can do this. You could say note.id is equal to, and then whatever the ID of the note is. Or better still, you could say, for example, note.create, and you give it a form like that. And that's going to work, and the ID will automatically be set in the background. So then I can say note.update like that, and give it the data it needs to update. and it's just going to work, and you don't even have to deal with IDs. It's all done in the background for you, which is why we do this extra layer of abstraction here, or at least it's one of the reasons why. It's just really cool. Like me and the guy I work with at work has we've come up with a really cool API with how to do this. So anyway, let's go ahead and build it, because this will make a lot more sense when we actually build this. So we got note.create, async function create, and then we can say await model API dot create, and this is going to accept a form. This is pretty much just a proxy through to model API's create. I don't think there's actually anything else we need to do there, but I prefer to do it this way just so we have that extra flexibility if we need to add any extra functionality in there, which we probably will at some point. Oh, actually, no, we do. So then when that's done, we want to say id.value is equal to model API.data. Okay, so hang on, how does this work? So maybe we do need the data pass through to use model API. So create currently isn't returning anything, but what we could do is return the data to make it easier to work with. No, I don't think I like that. I think I'd rather just expose data with API service.data. Yeah, let's do that. Data API service.data. So that means that little change I did there, this one here, that we can now say id.value is equal to model API.data.value.id. So we're basically just going to yank the ID out of the results we get from that data there. I think we tried this before and something went wrong, so we'll have to keep an eye on that code. You know what? We might even just use it to begin with to check that everything's working okay. Let's do a return like this, create, and see if this actually works. So when I change this to use model, we send through the note, and crap, we don't have access to any of that anymore, so I'm gonna have to do a bunch of commenting out. We only want to use create, so let's basically get rid of everything up to create, and we'll comment them back in as we go. And we can probably get away with keeping that. Use model, let's go ahead and import that. There it is, use model API is not being used. And there we go. What's this complaining about now? Loading, to get rid of the loading state as well. We'll bring that back in a second. Now model is coming from ORM. It's kind of hard to explain. There's quite a bit going on in here, but basically, I'll explain this as quickly as I can. We're using Supabase behind the scenes, and I'm creating basically an abstraction layer for dealing with syncing data between Supabase and the backend. So the idea is you can say use API if you would like, and its job is simply the dance between Supabase and the front end in terms of requests. So it only cares about sending requests. Now use model API uses use API, and what it does is it sends the request and it persists it to the store. Now use model uses use model API, and it goes a little bit further in terms of when you create a model, for example, it will then set the ID so we have an updated, so we can then start manipulating that model further. That part's a little bit hard to explain. You'll probably just have to wait until I've built it out for it to make a bit more sense. So that's kind of like a quick run through of where we're up to here. It's going to be really, really cool. I've done this kind of thing with Laravel, and now we're giving it a crack with Supabase. Okay, so now we set the ID value here, and I just want to check if that works. So let's come back to user dashboard. Let's refresh the page here. That's okay, it's a DevTools error, so there's nothing wrong with that. Create. Okay, so I forgot what I was testing now. What should have happened? Okay, so the ID should have been updated. So what I'll do is I'll take the ID out of here, which means we need to expose it here. And I know I'm going really fast. This is less of a tutorial video, and this is more me working on stuff, and you guys can sort of follow along and see how I see what I'm up to. So I'm sorry if I'm going a little bit fast, but it's kind of like this is the point of this is less of a tutorial and more of a let's just get this done kind of thing. All right, so I'm not getting anything printed out there for the ID. Let's just check if that pre-tag's even working. Yep, it is. So how about this? Let's just do a console.log of what we get back after this has been awaited. So we'll say model API.data, and it should be .value. All right, so enter something again. What do we get back? So we get back an array with our data in there when we do a create, which I don't like. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to create our own version of data within use model API, because its version of the data should be basically an accurate representation of how it's then consumed in use model. I didn't explain that very well, but I'll show you what I mean. So let's change that to data like this, and we're going to create our own version of up here by saying const data is equal to a ref, which will be nothing by default. Then here, when we insert the data for a create, when we're done with that, we can then say data dot value is equal to the data we got back, and we want the first record there. All right, so now data is going to be an accurate representation of what it should look like when we do a create. So when we do a create, we're not doing a create with an array, we're creating a single point of data, which is why it's getting the first one off the list, because it's always going to be a single piece of data. All right, so hopefully that makes sense. Clear as mud from view. All right, there we go. So now we want to do the same thing here. Once again, for a find, how does that come back? I can't actually remember. Let's go to find equal to ID. Yeah, we end up with an array from this as well. Oh, hang on. In here, we're saying data.value is the response data 0. So it is trying to give an accurate representation at that point down. All right, so let's go back. I'm going to undo everything and basically repeat what I'm doing one level lower. Okay, so API service data. There it is there. And we just need to make sure these are all correct. So when we do an index, data.value is equal to response.data. That makes sense to me, because it's going to give us an array of all of the objects. When we do a create, this is where I assumed wrong. I assumed that I would just get back an object, but I don't, which is why here I have to say response.data 0 in order to make sure I get the first thing there. And I'm just going to do a optional chaining just in case we don't get something back correctly there. Like we get some no data back, though I doubt we'll need that. So then we do a find, and yeah, this one's doing getting the first thing on the list, so that one's correct. When we do an update, I don't know how an update works. I think we don't have to say 0 there. I think we actually get an object back, but we'll wait and see if we run into problems with that. With a delete, same thing, I don't really know. Oh, it's doing a match there, so finds all rows. So in other words, you might actually get more back, so that should be a 0. And let's go back to an update. Finds all rows once again, so I think you do actually have to add the 0 in there to make sure you're grabbing the first one. And I want to make sure I got that question mark dot for all of the ones that say 0. There we go. A question mark dot 0. Cool. All right, so I think that's everything I need to do. Now, let's refresh the page. I can't even remember why I was fixing all of this, but let's see if it fixed my problem. Yes! So now we have that ID being set. And now here's the cool part. I can now fetch this from the store by adding in use model a computed property. So we'll say const model is equal to a computed property which is going to return model class.find. So this is a vueXORM method that we get, and we're going to find id.value. So now we have access to the model if it can be found. But this is coming out of the store now. This isn't a response from the backend. This is actually being pulled out of the store. So now let's come in here and pull out computed. And now check this out. If I go back to the user dashboard, we can pull out the ID. Let's pull out the model itself as well. Did I expose that? Yep, I did. I exposed it there. And then here, let's do the ID and the model. Like so. Create something. And there we go. We've got the model there as well. And this is the model coming out of our store, which is important because if we ever want to fetch it with like relationships or do any other fancy stuff like that, dealing with the model, we can. It's kind of hard to explain the importance of this, but you want to make sure that you're getting the right model there. Well, if you already have the data, so if we do an index, for example, and we set the ID here, and we set the correct ID then it's going to show up there. All right, I'm not explaining this very well, but unfortunately that's going to have to do. I really want to push on here. All right, so what else can we do? We've now got create functionality. Let's do some fetch functionality, which is probably going to be quite simple. So fetch, model API, it's got fetch as well, doesn't it? What do we call it on that? Model API. This is where TypeScript comes in handy. Oh, okay, so it calls it find. Well, let's change that to find then. Find. And so we don't actually pass through an ID here, and this is key. What we do is we say model API.find, and we use the ID.value that is set on this composable. That's how we do a find. So now, let's get rid of these console.logs. By the way, look how nice this code is since we've abstracted everything out. Super simple. And then when we do that find, we don't have to update the ID.value because it should ideally already be updated. So that's literally all we have to do. We just find it on the back end. Okay, cool. So that's find. Let's copy this code here and have a crack at update. Update. Now, what I'm going to do here is a little bit of error handling. I'm going to say if we don't have, if not ID.value, then I want to grab the errors on model API dot error dot value is equal to could not find ID or something like that. No ID set, something like that. That will have to do for now. And then we do an await on update. And we already have the ID, so we send through ID.value here. Then we'll do a return there, make sure that doesn't get hit. And we don't need to set the ID on an update. Would make sense to do it on an update. So we got create, we got find, we got update. Now for a remove, we'll say remove. And now if we don't have an ID of dot value, once again, we want to say that it's not set. And then we do an await on this. And then we say, when that's done, it just needs the ID.value. We can, that's also going to delete it from the store. Is that the right one? Yeah, use model API. So then we say ID.value is equal to null, which means that our model will also be equal to null by that point. Okay, and I think that's everything. We now want to proxy all of that nice functionality down after we've exposed all of these. Honestly, this is going to be so cool. Unbelievably cool. I love this sort of thing. Man, these headphones are starting to hurt my ears a bit. Okay, so now we need to proxy down a lot of this stuff, like model API. A lot of it's error handling, for example. So model API, what do I want out of it actually? Model API, we'll just go to the bottom here and just copy paste it all. So we don't need the data, at least we shouldn't need the data. Error, user ID we do not need. Indexing, creating, find, all of this stuff so we know about that state. See if I can get all that. Copy that, and we'll expose that here on use model. So use model for the most part should be all that we actually end up needing in the end. And now this is all coming off of model API. No, I don't want to expose model API. I just want to expose all this on model API. So let's do that and then say model API dot and then the thing. All right, I think that's it. So now I might actually take a break before we actually get into fully using this, but now all of that functionality still works. Index doesn't make sense here. We're actually going to create another composable a little bit later on called use model collection, which is going to deal with collections of data. Hang on, I'm getting a phone call. Hello? Hey. Okay, I'm just doing a live stream right now. Is there anybody else home? Yeah, just give Shannon a message or a call. All right, bye. Sorry about that. My sister has lost her phone. She wanted to see if I could find it within the house. All right, so let's do our final touches. We'll come up here and we will comment all of this out. And then we'll do whatever tweaks we need. And then I'm going to take a break, come back, and we'll actually build out this app. You know what? It's probably going to be easier by this point just to literally build the thing. Yeah, you know what? Let's do it. I'm just going to do a Hail Mary and hope that it all works. So, all right, we'll say Q-card. And I'll say style is equal to, I always do this for my cards, max width, something like, I don't know, 300 pixels. Let's go with that. And then we'll say, well, this will probably have an input inside it, but then we'll say V-4 is equal to, actually, in order to do this properly, oh, what's going on there? From refs. Oh, it's doing the ref sugar take 2 stuff. I don't actually want to do from refs though. No, that's not how I want to use it. But it's got $ref there, so I don't need that anymore. Cool. How does that work? I don't know. I haven't been using the sugar F stuff. All right, yeah, I might actually just come back to this because we now need to create a composable for dealing with collections. So basically the use model equivalent for working with collections of data. But anyway, that'll do for now. I'm going to take a break and I will see you all back here in about, I don't know, half an hour, something like that from now. I need to take a bit of a break. But yeah, thanks everyone.